Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Ryan with From Corners Unknown. I hope you're all doing well. A couple weeks ago, I had the pleasure of touching base with Graham Williams, an experimental, dark, ambient drone composer based in the UK. It's kind of hard to pin down his overall sound. He goes by a variety of monikers. Some of you may know him as nought, drone, Fencepost, as well as Less Than One. He runs the Fencepost reclamation project on Bandcamp, and that features well over 200 artists who have contributed remixes of a handful of field recordings he produced back in the early 2000s. I first learned of Graham's work about July of last year on a split he did titled Dereliction with Edward, also known as Screenslaver. And since learning about Graham's work through that split, I've been following him ever since, kind of digging back through his catalog and exploring his love for authors such as Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith, and his love for old school B-movies and schlocky horror films. In this conversation, we talk at length about a number of his projects, kind of how they were founded and how they've developed over the years. And we also look forward to 2018 and what his plans are for the remaining months of this year. And we also discuss the debut of his record label, Audient Void. So I sincerely hope you folks enjoy listening to this conversation. It is a bit on the long side. We talked actually much longer than this conversation, and we tried to cut it down to what we thought was a nice, concise focus on Graham's work. And there's just so much to talk about. It's hard to really cover everything. So maybe there will be a conversation between he and myself later on down the road where we explore more of his work. And for anybody interested in obscure films, Graham, Connor, and myself are going to be starting a new series where every couple of months we'll discuss two films with a particular focus on the scores of the films and how they elevate the films themselves. So it won't be so much in a review of the films we discuss, but more kind of the interplay of the music and how it interacts with the films and why it works so well. But as always, thank you so much for your continued support, and thank you for any and all support you can show Graham, any of his releases in his growing body of work, his reclamation project, as well as his soon-to-exist Audient Void record label. Just after this introduction, I'll play a new song he's written titled Devil Reef. And at the end of this conversation, I actually don't have the title of the track he's going to give me quite yet, so it'll be a surprise for both you and myself. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and thank you again for listening. Man, this is so we've been talking for how long? Since like I can't remember when we first started talking, man. That was
It was June last year when you reviewed the split I did with Ed, because I did a
oh
little bit
okay.
of researching the other day, and yeah, it was sort of mid-June that I first
Jesus,
emailed you to say thank you for the write-up. So yeah, 9 months or so.
that's it. It feels like it's been so much longer because we've exchanged emails like man, we've exchanged like well over 100 or so, right? I mean, it's been
Must have done. Yeah.
yeah, Jesus. So how have you been over there, man?
Yeah, I'm soldiering on. It's the same old, same old. Sarah busy studying, which we can go on to talk about. Hence, giving me the time to do music so much. So,
Right, right.
but yeah, she's been at it all day. But she's just nipped off to see her mum for a couple of hours because mum's been a bit poorly.
I
To
see.
just leave us alone. So there's just me
Sure.
and Onion, one of
How's
our cats.
how's the and what is she studying again?
It's a postgraduate certificate of education.
Oh,
So
nice. Okay.
yeah, so she'll be able to teach anyone over 14
Oh,
when she's
nice.
got it. Because she's been doing a lot of training. She was down in London on Monday doing
Oh,
a training
wow.
thing for the British Medical Association with various big wigs from government and everything. But
Oh. Huh.
so yeah, she
And
just
we're
needs to get this. Sorry, go on.
oh no no no. I was gonna ask where are you guys located? I'm not very good at geography, but what's like the general region you're located in the UK?
At Bedfordshire, which is about 45 miles north of London, directly north,
Okay. Okay.
and pretty much in the centre of the country.
And you said it's a little rural out there, or it's like a little more like farm towny. Is that right? I've never
Yeah,
visited,
yeah.
so
It's a lot of arable land. Bedfordshire's famed for its onions and its Brussels sprouts. So
oh,
yeah,
okay,
big flat muddy fields.
interesting. Okay, huh. Well, shoot, that all sounds good. I'm glad we were able to finally connect. It's been a good while. I mean, I remember we were talking about it for a bit, but it's good to finally have gotten this under our belt so we can actually talk. This is the first time. Yeah, I've always thought about like what your voice would sound like when we talk because it's always been through email, so it's always interesting just to kind of make that connection and
Oh, definitely. I was saying to Sarah just before I rang it, so it's so odd because I've been listening to you and Connor and obviously various other bands and musicians, but you and
right,
Connor quite a lot. So I'm used to your voices. So
right,
yeah, we were saying that very thing. Yeah, you don't even know what I sound like, and yet I'm really
right.
familiar with how the pair of you sound.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I think you missed. I was just saying, Harold and I were chatting about this the other day because he's following suit with his new pseudonym. He's setting up a completely fresh new band camp. He hasn't even told me what he's going to be recording under anymore.
And this
But
is
he's
who again?
Harold Phonox from
Oh
Austria.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I haven't heard from him in like over a little over a month. It's been a while.
Yeah, he does. He tends to sort of drop off radar for a bit and then pop up with 4 or 5 emails in a week if he follows the same pattern with you, and then goes underground again. But yeah,
Yeah,
he's a sort
yeah.
of
No, he
irregularly
has an
regular.
yeah, no, he has an interesting yeah, he has a very interesting workflow and just kind of the rate at which he churns out music always surprises me. Like sometimes he'll just like when we were setting up for the compilation and I made him aware of it, he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll get you a song." And then he like got me something within like I think a couple weeks, and I was like, "Jesus Christ, how the hell did you churn that out?" Like, and it's just like a great, he just cranks it out, and it's like this great drony soundtrack. And then I go on his Bandcamp, and he just seems to keep uploading more and
Yeah,
more.
yeah. No, I had the same when we did that John Carpenter thing. It went
Right?
from something we were just chatting about in an email to an actual project, and I had his tracks within about 2 days.
Are you shitting me? Oh my god!
We were ready to go within the week. That's how
Jesus.
quick. Luckily, I had a few tracks stockpiled that I was wondering what to do with, so they weren't recorded specifically for that project. But
I guess we could start getting a bit more into your music. And I'm gonna do my best, or we can do our best to talk about all the stuff you've produced. It is staggering to me how much output you you like unfurl on your Bandcamp. Like every time I go on your Bandcamp, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like where that, like I'm always just baffled at how much, like, where you get the time to produce all the music you do, and especially like the lengths of the songs. It's kind of mind blowing to me.
Oh well, we can peel back the veil in the conversation, and you'll be a lot
Right.
less staggered by it.
Well, with the phonics stuff, how did I don't think I was able to give that. I think I gave it like one listen, but it's been a while since I've revisited it. What was did anything come of that? I know you said Harold was looking to. He like sent it off to John Carpenter himself or whatever, right? Or he at least emailed him in some sense.
Yeah, I think he emailed him a link to so he could listen to it, but I don't think he ever heard back. He certainly didn't let me know he'd heard back, and I assume he would have done if you got an email from John Carpenter. You'd be telling people, wouldn't you?
Right. How does it's hard to figure out where to start, because you work on, at least in recent memory, you've worked on so many projects with other folks, and then you have a handful of splits or collaborations that you do with your various projects that you personally have, such as like Drone and Fencepost and all those. Like how do you generally like fall into these projects? Because I know you have you're doing that one with Alex of Death Tape Super Bass, and
that's right,
and then you have that sludge band from, you said that they're from California, the Wreck, WREK.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're because I'm in contact with them via Lee, who is in the band. He's the guy who records under Saihatsu as well.
Okay.
So he's the link there. So but yeah, that just came out of nowhere. But all of these collaborations, the splits, pretty much all generated via the Reclamation project.
Okay.
That's what's initially broken the ice, and then obviously sometimes there's a bit of a connection, and it leads to a split or a collaboration.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that a bit, because I know that's kind of, I guess so. On the Reclamation project, was that one of the first? When did you technically start that endeavor? Could you like describe that just a bit more for folks listening as well, what the Reclamation project entails?
Yeah, the Reclamation project is an ongoing remix project. It's essentially what happened is back in 2002, I did an EP using just recordings of pebbles in jars and elastic bands, and made an EP centered around just this very small, I think it's 47 different little field recordings.
Okay.
And then that obviously drifted off into the ether as I didn't produce anything for so long, and then within the same week I rediscovered the CDR with all the original recordings on, and just stumbled across Chris, who's the guy who used to run Evil in Records that released Fencepost.
Okay.
I found his new website, and so I contacted him back, and initially I was just going to remaster and re-release Fencepost.
Sure.
And then Rob from Radio Free Midwich, who I've known since my Leeds days 20 years ago, he said, well, hang on, I know a few people who'll do some remixes for you, just send them an email.
Okay.
And that's sort of how the pattern progressed, and people let me know of other people who'd be interested, or they share the actual original stem files.
Okay. And is this something that did it start on Bandcamp as well, or was this more just kind of like on the side in your email inbox and on other like platforms that weren't? Like, when did it technically start?
When I released it on Bandcamp, that was the sort of like the official launch date, as it were. Because I'd done a few remixes under my various different guises, and then waited for another handful to come in. So I just thought it'd be a sort of 12-track album. Right. And that would kind of be the end of it. But I actually counted up this morning, and we're now on 430 different mixes from 207 artists.
Jesus Christ. And
And
do you even like do legwork to like advertise this anymore, or do people just come to you and send you stuff out of the blue?
I spend probably 2 hours a week going through the Discover part of Bandcamp, and just going through all the various different genres, and then listening to different artists' works. I have a rough triage of bands and artists that I think might be interested in taking part.
Okay.
And then I just use the contact form on Bandcamp and send it out. And it's the law of diminishing returns. I get about 15% response to the emails I send out, and then probably about 50% of the people who respond then end up sending a remix back. So
okay, interesting. Yeah, no, that is an interesting bit when I was reaching out to folks on Bandcamp, kind of like the hit to miss ratio of people responding. I was always perplexed as if people just didn't reply because they weren't interested, or if I got some impressions from some artists that they like would feed Bandcamp like faulty or unchecked email addresses, and you'd like send people emails and it would just go into a void essentially, and they would never see it or your contact.
That's it. You never know. I mean, I had one response from a guy, and it was over a year. It was 14 months or something since he sent the email, and he just unearthed it in his junk folders.
And he is just like, oh crap! Did he actually end up producing or providing you anything?
Yeah. We got a remix off him, so that's the oldest one standing. But yes, you never know. Or people park them, intend to get back to them, and then they disappear from out of the inbox, sort of first screen.
Right.
And you never see them again, do you?
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Huh. That's crazy though. Like, I wonder if the person who sent you that email, if they even checked the date, or they're just like, oh, here's an email from somebody, and they just replied and they didn't even care that it's been 14 months. Like, if it's been 14 months for something, I don't think I would ever find reason to reply to somebody after that. But
no, it was a little bit of a shock when it came in. And
right.
I took the sent date, and as I say, it was 14 months ago, but they did allude that it had been a while since I'd sent it. But
God.
Yeah, whether they knew it was 14 months or not, who knows? But
right. So how about talking about your various projects in a bit more detail? I know we touched on this in the one interview I did, the written interview I did with you a while ago, but could you kind of refresh me and discuss just each of your guises, because it's still a fascinating, it's kind of an interesting, like when I just think of your projects and how you produce a handful of EPs or singles or songs, and you kind of say, oh, this is in collaboration with these two artists, but those two artists are technically yourself, right? And like how does could you just describe that a bit more? I know that's kind of a vague way of posing a question, but it's kind of elusive to me, just thinking how you work on a record.
Yeah, it's mainly a structural thing.
Okay.
All of the four guys is we'll get Fencepost out of the way, as we were just talking about it. All the Fencepost work, all I use there is field recordings that are then manipulated, edited. So there's no synths, anything of that nature. That's just all from field recordings.
Right.
And I'm rigid with Fencepost on that. And the same with Less Than One and nought. Less Than One is more of a sort of like ambient 90s, early 2000s electronic style of structure.
Okay. And what is that? What does that mean? Like, because I'm always trying to learn as much as I can about music. What could you describe in a way like what that structure is? Because I was still a relatively young kid in those days, and I probably haven't listened to enough artists nowadays to really know what that 90s, early 2000s sound is like.
Yeah, it was a very sort of synth-based, but it was when a lot of the very first technologies and softwares been able to actually manipulate the structure of the sounds. Came in, so a lot of different processes in the computer. Being able to manipulate frequencies, and so the 90s was sort of like the 80s was the birth of synth music.
Right.
Essentially, the 90s is what pushed it on. I think, in relation to a lot of the drugs coming in to the synth scene at the end of the 80s, and that sort of gave birth to the acid house movement in this country. Other countries, and then people wanted to push the technology a little bit further, and the day that somebody could plug their synth or their 303 into the PC or their Mac and actually basically get into the very structure and the makeup of the sounds,
right,
at a frequency level, that obviously that's a game changer. It's like genetic engineering,
sure,
but for sound.
So that's your less than one project, and then you said I'm already gonna screw that up. I always call it R0 because I always botch trying to say that aloud. Is it, you said rough knot? Or was it
R0?
R0. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, that one is slightly more structured as classical music would be structured.
Okay.
So there's a lot more layering. It's subtle difference, but with the less than one project, I may use a synth stab, but I'll only use one copy of the sample.
Okay.
Whereas with R0, you may find that I use 2 or 3 samples basically piled on top of each other to give it a bit more of a dense structure, like a string section of an orchestra or the percussion section. So there's a bit more layering goes on with R0, and the reasoning behind that is what I hope is it gives a bit more of a sort of like dense feel to the music, where some of the less than enough can be fairly Spartan.
Right. Okay. And then you also have drone, correct? With the 0 replacing the O in the name?
That's right, yeah. That was a direct result of the Philo Veride project I did under R0, which was the Ebola-based project.
Right,
and
okay.
I did a 12-hour live session.
Oh, shit, okay. Wow.
At home, just using only all of the stems and the samples and everything from R0, but a lot of it came out a bit more abrasive and drone-like. So drone has sort of budded off R0, so I can remain rigid in the structure.
Interesting. Okay.
But this unexpected offshoot occurred, and so a bit more abrasive.
Right.
A bit more drone in structure than the R0 work. So that's an inadvertent new moniker, or the newest, but still, it's nice to see where music takes you, isn't it? But I didn't want to sully the R0 project by bringing too much sort of abrasive noise and drone structures into it.
Sure, and it's just interesting to me to think about, just from like an artist perspective, or from your perspective, being like, it's almost like, I guess I don't really understand it fully, but it just sounds intriguing that you're like, I'm going to produce this song, you're kind of like splitting your mind into 2 separate artists, and you're trying to like assimilate these different styles and structures together, and then you call it a collaboration, which I just find really interesting because it's both from the same person.
That's right, but 2 different angles.
It's just
the one.
Right, and I mean, maybe there are other people that have done that before, but I've just like never, I seldom ever come across something like that where, you find a split or a collaboration, and it's technical, because that baffled me the first time when I wrote that review a while back. I'm like, oh, less than one is like the overarching, and then all these other projects. I had like no clue what I was talking about, and then you made me aware of it. I'm like, oh Jesus, like it's kind of it just came as a surprise.
I did. I got a visit on the Bandcamp page from some online blog, and statistics bit, and I clicked on it to see what they were talking about, and it was actually a discussion as to where net labels had disappeared to, and then the less than one page was listed as an active net label by one of these bloggers, and so that then someone had clicked on and come over to the site. So I suppose to anyone who doesn't know me, you visit the site and you would think there were 3-4
right
artists working under a sort of net label, but yeah, they're all mine, and apart from the collaborations and splits, of course. But
Right. Well, it sounds like a good way to kind of, I mean, unintentional or not, it sounds like that's kind of it's kind of like it's a neat morsel of information to kind of tuck away in plain sight, almost like some people wouldn't know, but when they discover it, they're like, oh shit, this is all the same person. Like, I think it'd be kind of like a revelation, or it'd be kind of like a neat little epiphany people could have.
It's a nice thought, like you say, that little moment of realization.
Right.
Like when you, not so much now because it's so much more well advertised, but when I was younger, you found Mike Patton was doing a new project, and you're like, shit, that's Mike Patton in that band.
Right.
And that little moment where you know, it goes from just the name of a band or a project is like, you know who's involved in it, and then suddenly it's a different world, isn't it? And
right, yeah, it's almost like the synapses just start firing, and you just kind of engage with the music a bit more than you would, you know, as opposed to just not knowing who is behind it or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So you got your day job, and you do some local government stuff, correct?
Yeah, I work for the local council.
Okay, and that's. And what do you do? Is that just kind of dealing with public and kind of like having, you know, like just kind of abating or like answering questions that people are concerned with in the local area, or what is the?
Yeah, that is essentially it on the head.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly what our department, with the only department that the public have direct contact to.
That sounds.
You know, if they're phoning or emailing, and then the vast behemoth of the council is sort of behind us, but we're the only people that they can actually speak to when they come in or they phone in.
That sounds unbelievably stressful if you're just kind of a rag doll that's just kind of, or like a punching bag for the public.
Most definitely. That not many people contact the council to say you're doing a good job. I don't know how it goes in America.
No, I seriously doubt that's the case as well. I've not heard many stories because I don't know anybody that works in the public sector per se. Yeah, that sounds stressful as shit though.
Yeah, and hence why I'm on reduced hours now, because I work full time 3 days a week now.
Right. And then so I guess in addition to that, so what always kind of blows my mind is every time I seem to go to your Bandcamp page, you seem to have a new release in the works, or, you know, like I just stumbled across your new Fencepost release, which came out 2 days ago. I was like,
that's right, yeah, Barbed.
Right, and I'm always just like, so you do like your part-time thing, so that's like 24-ish hours, 25 hours a week.
That's right, yeah.
But how the hell do you find all this time to produce so much music? Because when we're sending emails or, you know, going your Bandcamp, you're just like, oh yeah, you're working on that split with Death Tape, Super Bass. You know, you're working on some of that stuff with Joe of Old Block. Like it seems like you're always busy with stuff. And I'm like, how the hell do you have time? And, you know, the songs you churn out are 40 or 50 minutes in length, and it just blows my mind just to think of how you produce all this in the time you have.
Yeah, it's probably about 30 hours a week.
Wow.
Doing musical production. So it's actually more than my day job, more than my earning job.
Wow, okay.
But Sarah generally, she'll work in the evening as well. And so it's good for the pair of us that we've both got something that we can work on.
Sure.
We're at home, we're alone, but we're together sort of thing. I'm not just kicking my heels while she's doing a lot of work. You know, there's a big expectation for her to be doing an awful lot of work outside of the sort of like general work hours.
Right.
And then, I mean, last night, perfect example, I slept till about 2 o'clock, and then I couldn't get back to sleep. So
2 in the morning?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
shit.
So I'd had about 4 hours sleep, but again, as I've alluded to before in the emails, that's part of the course with PTSD, unfortunately. But it drives me to mentally construct songs.
I see.
When I'm lying, and rather than just lying there thinking, oh, I can't sleep, and the insomnia getting on top of you, I can actually think through how I'm structuring a song, what samples I'm going to use, the different parameters and effects
Right.
on any individual bit, which helps keep me sane through the night.
Right.
But then when I boot up the PC, I can hit the ground running. Because I pretty much know the structure. I know, 90% of the samples I'm going to use, and how much delay and things.
And how long have you been dealing, or how long have you been, living with PTSD? Has that been a good while?
About 17 years.
Okay.
But only the last 4 years actually diagnosed, which is why you see such a big gap in my music production.
Right. Because you were talking about that a little bit, or I remember you alluding to that with your Evelyn Records release, right? The stuff you used for the Fencepost reclamation.
That's right, yeah.
That was like 2002-ish or something like that?
Yeah, that's right. 2001.
2001, okay.
Recorded, and then 2002 released.
And then you really took a huge gap between that and within the last couple of years, correct? I can't recall when your first release dropped. When was your first comeback into the fold of music?
I started actual production again about 4 years ago.
Okay.
With Sarah encouraging me, because I'd not picked up any of my musical bits or bobs for years and years, and when I was pretty much at the nadir 4 years ago, and Sarah encouraged me to start recording again, just to try and get some of it out. Like a lot of other people you've had conversations with, mentioned the cathartic process.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's right. And I was going to say it just sort of like snowballed from there, and was a massive aid to me, getting back up to a level where I can live a pretty normal life.
Right.
And that did also create a massive backlog of work.
Right.
So when I started releasing things on Bandcamp 2 years ago, a lot of that prolific release schedule was things that I'd recorded sort of like 2.5 years ago.
Okay. Well, how was it though for you? And let me know if I don't want to get too personal or anything. But how was it for you? Between the time you were struggling with stuff to now, what was life like for you? In early 2000s to about 2014 when you started putting music out. What were you doing to try to maintain your sanity and all that?
Well, that period we can split easily into two sections.
Okay.
The part prior to me meeting Sarah, where all I was doing was just existing.
Okay.
I was just literally aiming for bedtime.
And that's it? You just get up and just wait until... Okay.
Yeah, you just get through the day, and then obviously meeting Sarah changed everything.
Right.
For me, and I'd rediscovered myself a little bit, and because we both met at a time when we were both quite down in our lives, so we've helped each other.
I see. And when did you meet her?
Nearly 11 years ago.
Oh, okay.
We've been married about 8 in May coming up.
Oh, shit. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, a long time all of a sudden. We were saying the other day when we walk into work, it's a quarter of our lives.
Right. Yeah, no, that's amazing.
All of a sudden. But, and I met Sarah, and that changed everything, and that gave me the impetus to need to get better.
I see. And that's so after you met her, the kind of the aiming for better, just really just trying to get through the day, that started to kind of winnow down a little bit. It wasn't nearly as intense or anything like that, or it wasn't as depressing.
Yeah, I had reason to get up the next morning after I'd met Sarah. That was what was different. I had something to look forward to, someone to look forward to being with, which I hadn't had for a long time.
Sure.
And you know what it's like. It's like the sun coming out from behind the clouds all of a sudden.
Right.
I was interested in being alive again rather than just existing in sort of hand-to-mouth existence.
Right. Or it's just interested me as we've talked about it, just... your illusions, or just mentioning PTSD and dealing with that, and just kind of how it relates to your music. I just find that I don't know how to describe, like, it's like something that just interests me, or just kind of, just kind of learning a bit more about that, about you, is, it just seems like it's really integral to the sounds you produce. So I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. They're utterly intertwined.
Right.
To listen to my music of sort of like 15 years ago, completely different. And I don't often revisit, as I say, the Fencepost work aside. I don't really hold any of my prior work in much regard these days.
You kind of just release it, and then you just move on to the next thing.
That's right, yeah. And especially, I mean, the collaboration I did with between the Arnaut and Drone about the Unit 731.
Yeah.
Being a perfect example. I had to get that out of my head.
Otherwise, it would just drive you nuts if you didn't do it, or...
That's right, yeah. It's a compulsive thing, both the production of the music, but my need to assimilate knowledge. I think some of it comes with a bit of age, because I never used to read many factual books 20 years ago, and now probably 80% of my reading is factual books.
Right. And how did you? Yeah, I guess touching on that a bit too. That I found that release to be very interesting. The Unit 731, that was based on those were the Marutas, right? When they were doing those tests in Japan on folks. Like, I don't recall the details. Was that in the World War II era?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. How the hell did you? I guess this could be, if we could make that a bit of a broader question, like what compels you to produce music around, a piece of history like that? Is it a way for you to, raise awareness, or try and keep that piece of history relevant, or like just to kind of keep it in the backs of the minds of people who may have forgotten about it? Because that was the first time I think I've ever stumbled upon it, actually, which intrigued me a whole bunch.
Yeah. Most definitely. I discovered a lot, through accidentally discovering about it, reading a tangential history of the Japanese occupation of China. And that's how I stumbled upon it. And then the more you read, the more you find out. But yeah, definitely things of that nature, I think, need to be brought up, periodically, as we go further away from the time they occurred. And anyone who was witness to it or involved in it, obviously now it's 70 years ago, they're thin on the ground now. And like we see the political situation in the UK at the moment with leaving Europe, and I see a worrying amount of analogues to the sort of political setup of Germany in the early 1930s. Yes. And there's a lot of analogues between the two, and for me, that's a worry. So, you need to bring that up and remind people.
Yeah. On that project specifically, like, does that... Like, how do you get into the mindset of producing music like that? But do you, like, feel like this overwhelming swell of emotion when you read about it and you're like, oh, this is something I got to produce music for? Like, how does that work?
Again, you're exactly right. That work, those tracks, they come from the perspective of one of the people that would have been trapped in that horrendous situation.
Right.
And,
okay.
You don't need to know all the details, Ryan, I tell you, because I now know things I wish I didn't know about it.
Really? Okay.
And, so it's, sometimes you need to be careful as to what questions you ask, because you don't want to know what the answers are. And hence why that's slightly more abrasive, very dense.
Yeah. No, I remember listening to that, and I was, like, getting creeped out just listening to it, just how, like, brooding and... just like miserable feeling that was. Like, not to like discredit the music, like I think it completely channeled feelings that I didn't even know I really had. I was just like, oh gee, like it just dredged up some dark thoughts, or took me to some dark places.
Then it did its job.
Right.
That's one of my most intentionally dark releases.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it? Do you ever try to like kind of get this out into the world a bit more than just posting it to your Bandcamp? Because I know you don't have much of like a social media presence per se, but have you thought about making any, efforts to kind of, proliferate and like make yourself more known in, the like public domain with your music? Or
Yeah, it's something that I often think about, and Sarah and I talk about, or I talk about with my friends, but then it all seems to eat into my production time.
yeah, it does.
And
It's yeah.
that's the payoff
Right.
for me. And
Right.
because the production's such a compulsive thing, it leaves very little time for sort of like the online media presence being any bigger than the Bandcamp,
Right.
which probably does work against it to some extent. But then,
Yeah. No, I think you're right though in that when you're doing the social media stuff, especially as you start to spread, your tendrils out into more and more platforms, it just becomes more and more consuming of your time, and like what you could be spending on producing, amazing music, you just waste it, You're just like kind of pissing into the wind, hoping some people will pay attention when most people just don't give a fuck. In my opinion, yeah,
yeah, well, that's exactly it. It's the state of a lot to me. I think that the social media is so immediate, but then it's
yes.
immediately forgotten.
Yeah, and that's a really good observation, and I do that to maintain some, to try and be like, hey, I still exist, but yeah, like just like when you release fresh music, it just seems like people like the time of carrying are kind of like the half life of music nowadays. Like a brand new record is like maybe 3 days or a week, and then it just falls from memory. It's insane, just like how like hyper consumptive stuff is nowadays, it seems.
Exactly, and you used to wait, 2-3 years for one of
Right.
your favorite bands or artists to
Right.
bring an album out,
Yeah.
whereas now, you know, again, you bang on. It seems that people are into it for 3 weeks, a month, maybe,
And then
but then the next big thing comes along, and all of a sudden, it's just consigned to the heap of other things that people have listened to.
right. Right. Yeah, and I can never tell. I can never tell, or I'm trying to think through that right now, kind of like if that's just, people's compulsive, like they just want to like keep moving on to the next thing, or if it's also like there's just so much music out there, like just the barrier to entry, especially like on Bandcamp, is extremely low. So it's just like people can proliferate, or they can be prolific, without putting a shit ton of effort into their stuff. And I just wonder if that plays a part in it as well. Like there's just so much out there that you really can't give your time and attention to much stuff. Like you have to kind of seek out the stuff that's really a gem, and you have to kind of like just hone in on those bits and just keep listening to those. But
Yeah, it's most definitely. I think it's that with Bandcamp, it's both the strength and the weakness of Bandcamp.
right.
It sounds odd for me to say I like the punk aesthetic of it when it is essentially a corporate entity, but
Yes.
there is that part where you can do your music, you can get it out there, and that's great for people who want to produce music. But then, like you say, the flip side of that is a lot of people produce things, and it seems to be in a very off-the-cuff manner.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen artists like just a couple days ago, like somebody like they probably threw up like 8 or 10 albums all in a row. So like they just took up like a checkerboard of the recent releases. I'm like, I don't know, like it just kind of puts me off. Like I don't know, like there's just something about it where like people are just like people just seem to throw up a bunch of trash. Just like thoughtless artwork and just like a bunch of random stuff, and I don't know. It just makes the whole process of discovery a bit more tedious.
Definitely, and I see some artists' names when I'm looking through Discover for the remix project come up again and again.
Right.
And a lot of them, they've just released one like 2.5, 3 minute song.
Yes.
And then day after that, they release another one. Whereas it's difficult for me to sort of put myself in those shoes of that sort of releasing short tracks very quickly. I mean, most of my projects, are between an hour and an hour and a half long.
Yeah, and that's something, I guess, if we want to kind of segue into that that was something that it made me laugh the first time, because I was just like blown away when you were like, for the compilation project that I put out, and you worked on the track Mycelium, and I hope I said that right, Mycelium. But you gave me a track, and then it just kind of blows my mind how you're able to produce so many different variants of the same track of such large and differing lengths. Because you gave me it was like a 15-minute track, and you're like, oh, I have a 40-minute track as well if you want that. And I was just like, how the hell do you have time to produce? Like how does that work? Just...
Well, the Mycelium is a good, because I think 6 or 7 different versions in the end are produced.
Right, and I just saw that. I was like, wow, like how does that, like, I guess thinking about that, how does that work, producing different iterations of the same song? Like, do you just, like, are they like, does each song represent a different concept you had in your mind at the time of producing it? Like, were you like visualizing what you wanted the song to do, and you're like, oh, this would be cool as its own embodiment in one track, and then you think of like a different tangent and you embody it in another track? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's generally how it works. I'll structure the song. It's a bit like Bob Ross getting all of his paints on his palette.
Right.
And then, like, say, as I'm working, I'll say, try on this synth, I'll, drop it down 20 octaves and put some reverb on it and think, oh, yeah, that sounds really good. And then note down those settings and then try it with maybe a bit of chorus on and no reverb. And note down those settings as well. So when it comes to the actual producing of the various different iterations, a lot of it I've already got noted down. So it's a matter of just changing a few parameters and the actual structure, I use a virtual mixing desk. So it's very easy to shift things around on the the time scales and the bars. You can literally drag and drop. So it's a longer process to start with, but then when I've got one track done, it makes it a much quicker process to explore all these different iterations. And
interesting.
The Mycelium, I mean, that whole came about because when you obviously invited me to have a track on the compilation,
yes,
I immediately I wanted it something Oregon based.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I was rooting around on the internet, and I came across the oldest and largest living thing on the planet. Is that huge fungus you've got living in one of the national parks.
Do you know which national park that is? Oh, really? Oh shit.
Not offhand, but I can soon find out and let you know. But yeah, and it's a mycelium set of mycelium, the underground part of the fungus, that they estimate to be 5,000 years old, and it covers about 5 square miles.
That's in Oregon? Holy shit, I did not even know that existed. I had no clue that's what that was. Oh, man.
No, me neither before I started, because as I say, I wanted to do something Oregon-based, obviously, because that's where you're based for the compilation, to give it that little sort of like link, and then obviously I stumbled on that, and I mean, if you're going to look in nature for some sort of Lovecraftian entity, there you go, you've got a 5,000-year-old 5 square mile
Jesus.
fungus.
Man, that's amazing.
Under people's feet, in the forests, and probably a lot of them don't even know.
Right. You're giving me like ideas for like almost like a horror movie, it sounds like, or something like that. Like that sounds like a perfect setup for something like that. Like
many years ago I researched it again as part of the mycelium thing. There was an X-Files episode. Which was quite a psychedelic one, and the kicker at the end is that they'd both fallen in to a pit. I think it was set in Oregon, and the mycelium had invaded their brain, sort of like magic mushrooms. So the
Oh,
whole episode was a kind of
wow.
trip, and they were stuck in this mycelium underground, which was slowly digesting them.
Wow. That's a connection I was not expecting to make this morning. That's insane. That like is giving me goosebumps just thinking about it. That's amazing.
Yeah, definitely one of the better of the old X-Files. But
I keep feeling like I'm just kind of scatterbrained with this, like just discussing, like there's just so much to talk about. Where you find the time to be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna turn this out, and it's just like album after album, where you do like the split with Edward, or like just there are just so many things that have seemed to come out in the last 3 or 4 months.
yeah, and at the detriment to some other projects as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ed. One of the film projects I've been working on, the Plan 9 one. Plan
Oh
9
yeah. We should talk about that a bit. I was gonna ask. Yeah.
Well, I looked at when I originally recorded all the dialogue from the film itself, and that was March last year.
Oh,
and I'm
geez.
still only track 5 of 11 for the project. So,
Oh, wow.
unfortunately, yeah, that keeps dropping down my to-do list because I have a little board next to my PC with all the various projects I'm on.
And
So I can
that's
keep
just
track of them all.
that's just for you personally. You're not collaborating, or are you collaborating with somebody else?
No, that's just a personal one, which is why
Okay.
when other artists contact me, or I'm doing a bit of mastering for a project or another artist, my personal projects sort of drop down because
Right.
I want to get them done, because there's a third party involved. I want to get them done to a high level in a timely manner.
Sure.
The film ones are the most indulgent of mine. That's as close to me having a bit of fun with the music as I get these days. So
Yeah, and
yeah, sometimes they suffer a bit in the list of projects I'm working on.
sure. Well, I guess staying on this train of thought just for a bit. So Plan 9. That's like an old. Is that like a slasher film, or is that like an old? That's just like an old horror film of some sort, or like a sci-fi film.
Yeah, sci-fi would be the closest. It's often talked about as the worst film ever made.
Really?
It certainly is. Technically, Bela Lugosi's last appearance
Oh,
before
really?
he died.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
But it is so bad.
Is it
That-
like? Is it just cringy everything, or what?
It's UFOs on bits of string. It's zombies. It's stilted dialogue. But
Oh,
you take
no.
that out of context, and the samples and the way they're saying, the way the lines are delivered and everything. There's so much scope for me to make something of it. But it's one of those films that I must have first seen when I was 10, 11.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
BBC Two here. This is when there used to be 3 channels of television that
Right.
stopped at midnight. So we're going back 30 years now. But yeah, when I was 12, BBC Two here every night at 6. They'd have an old B movie on, or an old Fu Manchu film, an old Godzilla film.
Oh.
So I grew up with this constant diet of B movies and men in rubber suits smashing up polystyrene cities, and and I've never grown out of that sort of like that guilty pleasure of liking these old B movies.
Yeah, like they're kind of shitty and campy, but there's a charm to it, like regardless at the end of the day.
Exactly. I mean, Them is one of my favourite films, which The Giant Ants, the 1954, I think it was.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. I've been meaning to watch that one actually, because I've seen like some people pop it up on Facebook here and there. I'm like, oh, that looks dorky as hell, but it looks kind of awesome and funny.
It is, and there's one bit where you can see this giant ant is actually just a big rubber giant ant perched on top of a Volkswagen Beetle being ripped through the desert. So that's the level of production values. But
Oh, man.
these days the analog would just be computer generated giant ants, wouldn't it? And
A lot of that looks like shit, honestly. I mean, I have
Yeah.
a lot more. It's not to say based on our conversations, you watch way, way, way more films than I do, and you probably have like I recall you said something to the effect of like you'll know within 10 or 15 minutes if you're gonna even finish the film, because like you hold, like you don't want to waste your time. You have some stringent standards on watching stuff.
exactly, I like Ray Harryhausen all the stop motion from the old Jason and the Argonauts film, and
Right,
that
right.
bit where he's fighting all the skeletons, and you think about him sitting in the studio individually moving every model,
Right.
every single frame.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot more love that's going into it. Like somebody really cares that much to spend their time.
That transcends it into an art form for me.
Yeah.
Whereas computers, it makes things so much easier, doesn't it? And
yes.
And yeah, it kind of robs a bit of the joy of it for me.
No, for sure.
Generated. It's a shame because it seems to be a dying art, all this stop motion. I just discovered the other day 3 short films by a Japanese director, and they're little claymation films.
Oh.
But based on 3 Lovecraft short stories.
Oh, for real? Oh, shit. You're going to have to send that to me.
I'll send you over the YouTube link, and they're brilliant. Obviously, they're subtitled, and yeah, there's the Dunwich Horror, the Festival, and the Old Man. So,
Are they recent?
Yeah, 2 years ago he made it, and he did win a couple of awards. I can't remember the director's name off the top of my head, but yeah, he won a couple of awards for animation films in Japan.
Wow.
But that sort of thing's never, it's never going to get to Oscars and things like, the Western mass media stream of filmmaking. But
well, I guess so. Staying just a bit more. I don't know if I'm boring you with this, but so it sounds like your love for kind of like old school schlocky films. It sounds like that seed was planted in your youth. And so how, like, what kind of compelled you to start making music? Kind of like, taking samples from these old archived films and being like, hey, I'm gonna, like, is it kind of going back to like that Unit 731, not in like its grotesqueness or like just its blight on humanity, but kind of like, raising awareness, or kind of like bringing something back into, like trying to make sure people don't forget about this relic of the past in a sense.
Yeah, to bring it back into focus, and yeah, the same with the films. Mm-hmm. A lot of these films, I don't think they deserve to be as forgotten as they are.
Okay.
And so the whole film project came about that initially when I was making music 20 years ago. Rob, who I mentioned earlier, he used to run a record label, a little CDR label, which was where I had my first releases, and then he did a tape only offshoot. He did 50 copies of 50 tapes.
Oh, okay.
And I passed Night of the Living Dead, The Birds, Jewel, the film with the guy being chased by the truck, Dennis Weaver. Mm-hmm. I did those 3 films.
Yeah.
But through like live filters. And the Night of the Living Dead one, I never really thought I'd done the film justice. So then when I started reproducing, I was like, right, I'm going to do that again.
Okay.
And that became the 17 Miles from Willard release.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that one. Yeah. No, I like that a lot.
Yeah, so that's sort of like a not 20-year project in chronological terms, but it took me 20 years to get to the point where I think I'd done the film justice from how I remember it growing up, rather than think, oh, shit, I wish I'd done a better job.
Right. No, of course. And then, yeah, you also did recently I guess within the last couple of years, that one with Alex of Death Tape Super Bass, right? The Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah, a fairly obscure European film, but
yeah, that's the French one, right?
That's right. Yeah, and
yeah, I love that.
Came about because Alex had done a remix for the Reclamation project, and then he just came back to me and said, "Oh, would you like to collaborate?" And that was the first time I'd actually collaborated rather than sharing a split with someone who wasn't me, if you see what I mean. All the other collaborations were just 2 of my different guises, whereas this is Alex from from California, so considerably nearer you than myself. And whenever any of these opportunities come up, I'm terrified of turning an opportunity down.
Yeah, no. And how was it working on that one?
Undeservedly forgotten film, and Yeah, it was a brilliant process. What we essentially did is I made 4 sort of sound beds, Alex made 4 sound beds, and then we swapped them to add the other elements into them, and then mastered them. And I think, if memory serves, I think that the track listing ended up with Alex's tracks and my tracks in 2 blocks of 4, but trying to get them so there was a sort of narrative flow through the project as well.
Right.
Like when you watch the film, and the tension builds and the pressures mount.
Is
and
it
everything.
does those tracks, does the runtime of it sync up with the length of the film? Like, are you supposed to watch it in tandem with the film?
No, I think the film's about half an hour longer.
Okay. Interesting.
So, yeah, it'd be a nice idea, though, thinking about it, to have done.
Yeah, like kind of like make your own
Full length.
soundtrack. Yeah, almost like you can kind of put it on mute and just read the subtitles and have the music kind of droning on in the background.
Yeah, that's a good idea for a future one. I'll have to mention it.
That'd be
to
really
Alex.
cool. I guess I definitely wanted to speak just a bit about the like, are you allowed to talk about the stuff you're doing with Joe of Old Block? How has that been going?
Yeah, I don't think we can't talk about it. I haven't heard back from Joe since our initial email exchange, but he hasn't come back saying he's not interested. But going really well. You heard the sort of like, I suppose it'd be the demo, the rough version of Devil's Reef.
Yeah, I thought I'm surprised that you even call that a rough version. I thought that was a brilliant track. It sounded pretty much complete to me, but then again, my ears are not nearly as well trained as a producer of music, so.
Yeah, the mastering is just some little subtle retweaking of a few levels, and I probably overthink that part of the process a bit too much sometimes.
Sure.
The creative part, it's a rush to get it all out as quickly as you can, but then the going back and polishing, and then when you've listened to it sort of like 15 times in a day, you can lose a bit of perspective. So one of the hardest things I ever learned was knowing when to stop, because we could all be sitting working on the same song forever, just tiny polishing this, polishing that, or a review or a conversation you could be there forever. There's always little bits of the project, I think, when you think back, you think, I'd have done that differently, but
right,
that's part of evolving. It's one of those things that comes with creativity, I think, but it takes a bit of time to learn when you are at the point you should stop.
Right.
That's what I do with Devil Reef. Like I mentioned the other day, it got to the point where it didn't have perspective. So today I've just gone and remastered it. So just dropped a couple of the levels slightly in the lower end of the piece, as it were.
Right.
Just
And what?
to give it.
What's the
Sorry, go on.
no? Yeah. What's the project with could you just illuminate that a bit more with Joe of Old Block? Is it kind of like, are you producing like an EP, or are you just producing a cluster of songs to kind of create like a sample for him to listen to, or what does it entail?
No, this is to my mind. Obviously, when it goes over to Joe, it may change, but this is going to be a collection of pieces.
Okay.
With the interlinked theme of various different environments mentioned in Lovecraft stories.
Right.
Trying to capture the essence of those.
Okay.
Like I was saying before, the titles being signposts to the sort of areas your imagination should be going. So I've just finished one based around the Dunwich horror.
Nice. Okay.
Moved on to one based on the Mound, and much like I did with all the Gorecrow remixes, which all had remix titles that were various locations in Clark Aston Smith's stories.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of concept of this project, and I mean, hopefully Joe's into it and he likes it, and they're a little bit more stripped down and spacious than some of my other works, but intentionally so, because I suppose I'm trying to grasp a bit more of the sort of like environment of the locations within the music.
Sure. And so is it? Are you hoping? Is the hope or like supposed to be released? You think, or you think like you may get released on the label, or like the songs may get put out digitally?
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. And as I say, we haven't had any further discussions. Joe said he was looking for adding artists to the label's roster.
Sure.
So he said, if you've got any unreleased tracks, send them along. And whilst I've got a few, I didn't feel I had enough that were sort of thematically similar to be able to just send over. I didn't want to just send over a scattering of different tracks, and
Sure, yeah.
rather send him a sort of like good solid hour and 20 minutes.
And then
tracks.
he can kind of sample them or whatever and figure out which ones to release, or maybe like figure out a way to like trim it down to like a tight little compact release or something like that.
Exactly so, and
Okay.
we shall see where it goes, and then maybe a little further down the line, I'll do some remixes or reinterpretations that
Sure.
may be longer, because I've tried to steer myself away from the sort of like 30-plus minute tracks.
Sure.
A couple of them are 20 minutes, and then a couple of them around the sort of 15-minute mark, and then the Devil's Breath one, the shortest, about 10.
Yeah, can you like how does it work for you when you produce a track that long? Can you just is it like you can't help yourself in producing like a short track? You're just like, oh, like this, you're just like you just have the world or the story in your mind, and you're just like, oh, I know exactly what I want to communicate through sound, and you just like it just takes that much time to be able to kind of produce the atmosphere. How do you process that?
That's right. Yeah, it's the exact flip side of the coin to when I used to produce. I used to have trouble dragging a track over the 5-minute mark.
Oh, okay.
Whereas now, these days, I'd have trouble truncating a track to
Right. Right.
A lot of the time, the intros take 5 minutes.
Right.
But for the sort of like the style and the themes that I'm trying to encapsulate in the music now, I think sometimes those tracks need some space to breathe and evolve, and like you say, evoke that sort of brooding, oppressive atmosphere. And a lot of the time, I think when the tracks are shorter, you build that atmosphere, and you've got people entranced within it, and then it ends.
Right.
And a lot of tracks, I think, if only they'd made that go on another 10 minutes or so. And so some of it's to do with that, but as you say, a lot of them just organically become longer tracks.
Sure, yeah.
Trying to build the atmosphere and then sustain it, and then towards the end, obviously, come to some sort of a conclusion.
Right. Yeah, that's something that's always funny, or I've found that to be such an interesting bit when I've been kind of diving deeper into ambient. You got some of the shorter stuff, which I appreciate, and then generally I always long for tracks to be longer, because the drones or whatever, like, they're so engrossing that I'm like, oh, I want this to keep going. But then there are certain tracks where it's just like, even if it's 30 minutes, it's like, man, I just never want this to end. Like, you just listen to it and you're like, yeah, I can listen to this for like 8 hours, no problem.
Yeah, the mesmeric nature of longer tracks, I think, it changes how you actually listen and interact with the music.
Yeah, and it happens so much to me though. Like, even when I listen to your stuff, or like Joe actually released a brand new like little EP recently, like within the last few days, and I love that. I was just like, holy shit! Like, and the longest track is what, like 5 minutes. I'm like, man, make like a 30-minute track. Like, I just want to keep hearing that. I mean, I guess I could play it on loop, but
Yes, definitely. It's like you say, so often you hear a track and just, if only that were 5 times the length it is.
Right.
You really get your teeth into it, and
yeah.
I think with the quite atmospheric nature of sort of ambient music, and the tertiary genres around it, it can expand to fill that time.
Right.
Whereas conversely, I doubt you'd want to sit and listen to a 35-minute techno track or something.
No, I would go like drive off a cliff or something. Like, I could not do that. Like, I listened to that one song you sent me, which was like 10 minutes long, from Atash. I can't say it.
Auteka, I think.
Auteka. Okay, I was like saying Atasher, like some like I don't know what I was thinking. That was me just being an idiot. Yeah, that, like, I was listening to that track, and that's like a 10-ish minute long, I wouldn't call it like techno, but like electronic. Like that song though, Flutter, I was like getting goosebumps listening to it. It's such a like beautifully atmospheric, heavy song. I just love everything about that.
Yeah, they're so. I mean, even today, I think they're so unique in the
Yes.
electronic music, because that's from 20 years ago, that track.
Which is crazy to me that I listen to that and I'm like, man, that's so much better than a lot of it, like it sounds, I guess I don't want to discredit it, but when I was younger in my days with my shittier tastes in music, like drum and bass and all that stuff was something I liked. And then when I listened to this, it's like, no, like this track Flutter is just like, it's beyond so much other electronic music I used to listen to. Like there's just something so much greater about it that I can't really describe very well.
No, that's exactly it. Some of their albums I've been listening to for years, I still haven't fully comprehended.
Right.
I think, in many years to come, people will still be talking about them. Like,
Yeah.
you imagine how much classical music must have just drifted away into the, nothingness.
Right.
We don't know the composer's name or what their music sounded like, because it was their analogue of the sort of disposable, and yet we still talk about Mozart and Wagner, and I think,
Right.
in the future people will still be talking about Ohrtecker
Yes.
as these incredible composers. Whereas, how many, like you say, drum and bass producers are going to be spoken about in 200 years in music?
No, yeah, no, that's really strange, or it's really interesting just thinking about that too. Kind of like what seems to make some of these artists like immemorial in a sense. Like when you just think about it, like there's just like this allure that kind of surrounds their music that's almost timeless. Like I was like, like we were talking a bit, like I've been listening to like Stockhausen. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but listening to him, I'm just like kind of blown away by, like how it still just sounds like it transcends anything I've listened to nowadays. Like there's just something about it that I'm just like, yeah, like I could see this being talked about forever, pretty much. Like it's just so out there. I don't know.
That's it. I think, again, like we were alluding to earlier, it's taken the step into it being a piece of art, because
Right.
it still evokes that emotional response irrespective of content.
Yeah, and it just doesn't seem to be tethered by any it seems to be untethered by time. Like it just seems to be kind of like this floating mosaic. Like it just seems to be kind of like I don't know how to describe it very well.
But yes, it's complete without any sort of like anchoring to a time or
Right.
a specific movement. And just coincidentally, I was watching a documentary yesterday on the New York minimalists, Glass and Reich in the late 60s and the early 70s, and how they changed music, and Stockhausen popped up in that documentary.
Oh,
And he had
interesting.
a circular table with a rotating top, and in the middle of the table was sat a speaker, and at each of the cardinal points there was a microphone, and he was spinning the table around. So obviously when the speaker went past the microphone, it created a little bit of feedback. And
Interesting.
rotating it quicker and slower, and then recording that.
Wow. That see, and
yeah,
that like just listening about like how people like produce music like that though, like I just like that just sounds like such an experimental way to do stuff. Like you have so many people that calculate their sounds out and like they produce in a certain way, but that just sounds like kind of like this.
Yeah, let's just see what happens.
Right.
Let's just set it up and we'll see what happens. And yeah, for me, I'm far more structured in my thought process towards music.
Right.
So again, that adds a sort of like alien aspect to it,
Sure. Yeah.
because it is the sort of immediacy of it, and it's somehow like you say, it's timeless, but it's capturing that specific moment when he was doing that.
Yeah.
Even if he replicated that, it wouldn't sound exactly the same. Whereas, sheet music or bands, that they play their tracks and they're sort of the same as they were last time. But
Yeah.
with Stockhausen, the other sort of like electronic experimenters, it's very much that immediate moment that they're capturing and immortalizing. And I think that's what maybe takes it out of the sort of general feeling that you get with music at being of a particular period or a particular time.
Right, yeah, and it seems like there are just so many genres. I mean, like even drum and bass. I could be talking a lot of, I may be spewing ignorance here, but it seems like that's already kind of like come and gone, and it's almost like a forgotten genre in a sense, or it's not really like in the limelight as much as it used to be. I could be totally talking shit though.
No, I think so. I think it's well, in this country, I mean, it sort of stems from jungle, and then that, drum and bass came off from that, and then it over here especially, it's more dubstep.
Right.
The various tangential subgenres, because I get a bit bamboozled by all the subgenres of all types of music now. Especially if
it's
you
insane. It's insane.
Discover, and I've never even heard of that. When I first saw Witch House as a genre of music.
Oh, Witch House is a genre? What the fuck? Really?
Yeah, and sort of like sinister house music, but I discovered that on the Discover bit of Bandcamp. But my first thought for Witch House was obviously the dreams in the Witch House, Lovecraft.
Right, yeah. No, seriously, that's...
But yeah, it's sort of like a goth, emo house music is how I think you could describe it. Probably sounding completely out of touch and very old to the kids who are listening to it, but...
I mean, if there's anything that I've learned through conversations I've had with artists that you've listened to, I have artist conversations and exchanging emails, is that artists don't seem, of the ones I've spoken to, a lot of them don't seem to, not that they don't take kindly, but a lot of them don't seem to be very interested in the way they're described by genres. Like, you listen to the Year of the Coyote one, and they're like, oh yeah, people call it like metallic hardcore, but they're like, yeah, we just play what we want to play, and like what comes out is what comes out.
No, it's exactly so. I mean, I never describe my music using any specific genre. I sort of ended up having to shoehorn myself into dark ambient when I started the Bandcamp page,
right?
Because it asks you what genre you are, don't
right.
it? So that was like the least worst fit.
Yeah.
For it, but yeah, I think you're right, and like you say, listening to your conversations, it seems to be a thread.
Yeah.
It's just like you can call it what you like. If you listen to it and you like it, then that's brilliant. If you don't, fair enough. Move on and listen to something you do like. But
right.
I think that the genres are more for the especially the businesses, and the way everything has to be compartmentalized. But
right.
Those entities, both individual and sort of corporate entities that are outside looking in, rather than we, the people who are inside, because I don't think I share very much musically in common with the lads in Coyote, but
no,
that thought process is still the same. The feeling is still the same.
Yes,
irrespective of what we're producing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a funny thing that these need to labels. I've gone from, Public Enemy and hip hop, being the biggest threat to American culture for 20 years, to utterly homogenized and on every other advert you see in the space of kind of 20 years. This sort of like dangerously revolutionary music to, oh no, actually we've co-opted it now, and now we're using it to flog stuff back to you.
Right. Yeah.
But it's labeling anything, it's music and films and everything. I think, like people, they boil down into they're decent people, or it's decent music, or it's not. And it's the whole world is too divisive, isn't it? It's all set up to divide us and put us in little groups, and I suppose that harkens back to the sort of like chimpanzee clan mentality of primates, the us and them, and well, they've got better than us. But at the end of the day, if you're into it, then you're into it, and who needs a label? And other people want to start labeling you and sticking sort of like certain ascribed, predestined descriptions on types of music. Then that's for them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I'm genuinely trying to do better. After speaking to to a handful of folks, I'm trying to like slowly peel away that aspect. I mean, there's a certain point at which it's like, to get somebody to listen to something, providing at least like 3 words that at least, like in your case, it's like, oh, dark ambient or like experimental ambient, like just so people have some clue, so they're not like walking to like death metal or something like that, that, like, that's like the very basic I have to give at least so people know what they're getting themselves into. But like, I'm trying to think of ways, and going forward, I'm going to try to like, pare that down, because it feels like, when you try and categorize it too, it feels like you can kind of create kind of just like a false way of criticizing a band too. Like if you're like, oh, they're a death metal band, but they don't play like to like genre norms, you know what I mean? Like it seems like you could be like you could be comparing a band to like an artificial barrier in a way, because you're like, oh, well, they claim they're death metal, but they're not this kind of death. Like, like it seems like you could automatically like you said, like divide people. It's just like, oh, I don't like tech death, but I like death, and it just seems like it's a really easy way to kind of move your opinion in a way without really focusing on the musicians and the instrumentation and the compositional process and things like that. Like, it seems like it's such a way to like blanket statement or just kind of write something off without actually giving it its time of day.
Exactly. However, like you say, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
The analog, walking into a record shop with all different genres and all just higgledy-piggledy, like in a charity shop or a thrift store, your neck of the woods, and you just get this bundle of records,
right?
There'll be maybe 2 or 3 old soul records and then some old classic, and you just have to root through the lot. But you wouldn't think of doing that in a record shop with 6,000 records in,
right? Nope.
So you do need those sort of signposts so people know at least, like you say, roughly what they're listening to.
Yeah.
But it's a funny thing, because again, the creative process, I think, is what drives people to create, and then having to describe it comes after that, doesn't it? When I started making music again, I didn't think, right, I'm going to start making this type of music. I just started producing around, and
right.
I remember it was the very first Carrion track, as it became, and I just dropped the octaves, piled on the delay, and it completely changed how the track sounded and evolved. And I was like, right, now I can start exploring doing this sort of thing.
Sure.
And it's sort of been a very natural progression from that idle bit of sort of experimentation just to see what would happen.
Right.
And it's what they now call dark ambient. But again, like you say with Autech, how do you even classify them?
No, and it's like it gets to a point where it's like it's better just to call the band by the band name themselves and just try and find interesting ways to describe what they sound like, devoid of genre descriptors, because genre descriptors are just so rigid. And like you said, with Witch House, like, what the fuck? Like, that's just, like, you're just getting into these extremes where it's, I don't know. Like, that just, there's a point at which I'm just like, I roll my eyes when I see certain genre descriptors. I'm like, really? You just made that up? Like, people just seem to pull stuff out of their ass sometimes, with some of the descriptions.
To try and give it that sort of like little cliquey elitism, I think.
Right, yeah.
You're into it, and other people haven't heard of it because they're not cool enough, or
right. Or it's like a way for them to like kind of self-ascribe and be like, oh, I'm a pioneer of this genre, and it's like, yeah, but you're the only one in that genre which you named, so it's like you're just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of comes off, it's a little pretentious in some cases, I think. And
most definitely,
self-masturbatory in a way, maybe.
And quite often comes with, more interest being put into how they're perceived than again the standard of the music. It's
right. Yeah, definitely
different. Yeah, kind of. How is this going to be perceived by other people?
Right.
Rather than I need and I want to create, and then we'll stick it out and we'll move on, and people can make what they will of it, sort of thing. But it's sort of a as you say, a kind of unpleasant elitism, I think.
I mean, I guess going back to Joe stuff. So I definitely haven't read as much Lovecraft as you have. I just don't have time. But I was interested in those compositions you're producing for Joe. Like when you produce stuff in the Lovecraft mythos. Like what is that like for you when you read, like just producing songs? Like is it like when you read his stories and stuff, and like even Clark Ashton Smith's, like does it I don't know, like is it like a very immersive thing for you? Like how I can't think of a good way to ask the question. Like what compels you to create music kind of in the vein of all these of like those short stories and such?
Yeah, it's like you say, it's the immersive nature of those stories. The 12, the rats in the walls, and it was one of those sort of revelatory stories.
Right.
That I started seeing a different type of fiction, and when I wasn't producing, I did try to write some short stories and
like some other ones that weren't like just like your own personal ones.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
But it never flowed in the same way that making music
I see.
did. So like when you read one of the great stories, and Clark Ashton Smith especially is so evocative.
Yeah.
Of these opulent alien worlds, and I think my music's an extension of trying to grasp that. They're describing it through words to help paint the picture in your mind,
right?
But by using sound to do the same thing, and a lot of like the frequency work that I put in, especially in the lower end, is deliberately done to unsettle. You use very low frequency, like infrasound.
Have you been using that a decent bit? I remember I've been doing a little more research on that. I find that very interesting, the infrasound.
Yeah, most tracks have a little seasoning of infrasound in there. I try and use it sparingly, and maybe 1-2 specific frequencies.
Okay. Did you use it in that Devil's Reef song?
There is, yes. There's a very low sine wave running under that, which you might just be able to hear.
Interesting, yeah. Because when I listened to that, like what I love about that track when I was listening to it is it made me like I don't remember that story. It's been a while, but it is like it kind of gave me like these, like you're standing out on like like a rocky bluff, and you can kind of like see like the glow of like the cyclopean like ruins underneath the ocean waves or something like that. Like it just like gave me like this really creepy feel while listening to it.
And that's it in an absolute nutshell. You've listened to that bit of music, and
right.
For you, it's painted that picture, like you say, of that windswept headland,
right?
This ominous glow under the sea. You saw an awful lot. There's a litmus paper. That's where a lot of the song titles come from. One of the Tungsten ones I did, the Triffids and Ambush Predation, that had no title, and I played it to Sarah, and she went, "Oh, it sounds like the Triffids," and hence where the title came from. And now you listen back to it, that drumming noise is very reminiscent of the drumming noise of the Triffids communicating with each other.
Yeah.
But the title came after the fact. When I was making the song, I just thought, that sounds brilliant.
Yeah,
and,
no, definitely. Yeah.
And yeah, one of the Dementia 13 ones, Little Fish. And because I played them to her and I said, right, what's that putting in your head? And she said she had a vision of a grotesquely fat man in a pair of dirty pants sitting on a rocking chair, rocking backwards and forwards by a pond. And that was just from the little intro.
Really?
Yeah.
Just from that little sound?
Somebody else listened to it. What picture would that paint for them? So that's when I get a bit of gratification, because I think I'm hitting the nail on the head there. If it's evoking these sort of visions with people,
right, yeah,
that's where it's sort of like hitting the same notes as the literature.
Yeah, no, and that seems to be kind of a Yeah, I like that aspect of it, and that's kind of one of my favorite aspects when I find ambient artists that, or just like anybody that produces kind of like soundscapes, not really like instrumental based. When I can listen to it and it kind of evokes images, or it kind of transports me to places that you'll never see in your lifetime, but you can like see them in your dreams or your nightmares or whatever. Like that's when I feel like I really like that kind of music, or I really like what that artist produces. Like that's kind of a metric I use for if I like it or don't like it. Like if it
definitely.
Yeah, like if I'm like, oh, this is just some boring noise, but if it's like kind of dredging up these really interesting thoughts or these feelings, it's like, oh shit, like there's something here.
Yeah, most definitely, and that's something that growing up I came to recognise the difference between, because you cease to sort of like physically be listening, don't you? You're not consciously listening anymore.
Right.
You're completely immersed in. And Penderecki, the composer, they used a lot of his works in the Shining soundtrack.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, did something about that music for me. You're immediately, it's like being abducted into this dark, sinister world.
Right.
And 5 minutes of that, some of his pieces seem like you've been there for hours and hours.
Yeah. I think the only film I could recall recent memory where I had that kind of a feeling was when I was watching Eraserhead, like that opening 5-minute track or whatever. That track, like I was like just watching it, and I just like felt like I was floating through an abyss. I don't know. When I listened to it, I was just like so captivated by just like that ominous drone. Like I don't know how to describe it at all. I just get chills thinking about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Just the whole. There's something oppressive about the music, isn't there?
Right.
In Eraserhead.
Right.
But compulsive at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember clearly when Aphex Twin selected Ambient Works 2 came out.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
Oh, and that was my first real sort of introduction to what we'd now call dark ambient. But like I was saying earlier, at the time, that didn't even exist as a genre really. So that's something that's now become labelled after the fact. But I can still picture vividly lying there and being on like an abandoned moon base with a big cracked geodesic dome, and as vivid, if not more vivid, than if I was there or watching a film of it. Just this one of those pieces of music. That's how it resonated to me.
Right.
Like this outer space dereliction, being truly on your own without any help around you and everything. And yet my mate lying next to me, he was having visions of some sort of like dark primeval forest. With things lurking in the trees and everything. So same piece of music, listen to at the same time, but just the way your imagination goes off.
Yeah.
And I think you get that with Eraserhead. I think you get 5 people listen to that, especially like you say, that first segment.
Yeah, that blew my mind when I was listening to it. Like I was just like so entranced, just watching like the weird visuals that really made no sense at the time. Like everything you're just like, what the fuck is this? But like the music was just like anchoring you in despair. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I think that is exactly it. That's the thing that most people I think miss with Eraserhead is it's that constant, unending, droning, industrial soundscape. That's what holds you in the film.
Right. I was curious too about your Audient Void record label. How have things been going on that front?
Oh well, we're arguably at the point where we can launch the first bottle. We're hoping to go to the coast in mid-April. We've got a week off.
Oh, nice.
So
okay.
The website's actually done, but because I haven't sort of released anything on it on Bandcamp, you can't actually view it on Bandcamp yet. When you go to the page, it just says nothing posted here. It's just a white page. So
yeah.
So what I'll have to do is do a sort of like ersatz release on Bandcamp when I launch the bottle.
How is that working? So you're doing, is it just the one, or are you going to do multiple spread out over the week, or how are you? What's your approach? Like, can you describe that a bit?
Yeah, at the moment I have two SD cards, so I'll be releasing two bottles from different points, probably at different times, obviously, just to get some miles between the areas of the coast, because the east coast I'm going to, the bottle will be going into the North Sea, so that's more likely to sort of like hit Europe, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, France, something of that nature. Whereas if I can get one from the other side of the country, that then goes into the Atlantic, which obviously opens up the scope a bit more.
And what's so the hope is that somebody will actually find this and go and uncover it somehow, or like get to your website from launching. So you're going to put the SD card in like a small bottle of some sort with like a little note in it, essentially.
Exactly so, and launched into the sea. And on the news earlier this week, there was the world's oldest message in a bottle was found off the
I saw that.
coast. Yeah, 134 years or something. So, yeah, you never know. They might just disappear off into the ocean, never to be seen again. But yeah, it's a bit of an exploration and voyage into the unknown. But an exciting prospect to think that it could wash up on a coast somewhere at some point in the future, and somebody actually contact the website, and so we can actually put a mark on a map as to where it was found.
Right. And you're going to release, you're not going to wait for somebody to get in contact with you, right? Like, you're going to release the album soon after you launch the stuff into the sea. Is that right? Like, you'll start the label up soon thereafter.
Yeah, as soon as I've launched the bottle, there'll then be the digital version on Bandcamp.
Okay. And are you planning to do any like physical releases of stuff, or is it just going to be digital for a while?
No. Audient Void is hopefully purely going to be for physical releases.
Okay.
With sort of like a Ursat's digital version on the website, but you won't be able to download them, because the next Audient project I'm going to be doing is a series of CDs, which I'm then going to hide at various different places we visit, again with instructions to contact us to where you found it.
No, that's
take a copy, and then you go and hide it somewhere, and we'll see if we can build a pattern. So
interesting.
And physical releases, in that they will be physical CDs, but it's not a sort of a financial project, as it were. It's just taking the music out of the digital medium and actually into the real world.
Yeah, and as opposed to just selling it at like a CD shop or a record store, like you're actually trying to engage with people in a different way, or like
that's it, and to sort of go into the unknown a bit, and there is the chance that the CDs will never be found, or people will find them and not do anything with them. But it's still going to be interesting to find out what does happen.
Yeah. The realm of possibilities seems almost infinite in this case, right? Like, who knows what may come of it.
Exactly, like the bottle that had been in the sea for over 100 years.
Right. Yeah, no, that's...
the chances of that ever being found, and yet that happened. And it harks back to, like with the tape production, actually having a sort of physical medium rather than being tied to the digital world and it all going over the internet. Actually getting some tangible projects out there.
And kind of like spreading it around by word of mouth. I mean, as I've been doing more of these conversations, it seems like there's a lot more value in like word of mouth recommendations than just like, oh, here's a link to this cool band. It's like talking about it, or like having somebody like engage with it other than just reading about it on the web seems to like make a more intimate connection with the people that listen to your music.
Most definitely, and that's how. It's certainly for me. That's how you used to find great bands. Because your friend would hear from someone about this record, and then they'd go and buy it, and you'd listen to it, and shit, that's Black Sabbath.
Right, and that's
more word of mouth, wasn't it? And
Yeah, that's an era that I missed. That is something that I was too. I think I just missed that the crest of that wave. I think like by word of mouth, like everything. Like by the time I started getting the music, it was like all like iTunes and shit like that. So like I didn't really have
Yeah.
perspective on like, oh yeah, listen to this, and then they give like somebody will like burn you a CD or something like that. I almost never had that happen to me. But I'm
Yeah,
just now realizing the importance of it as you're describing.
yeah, and it's nice to see that there is a resurgence. You
Yeah,
know, I hadn't heard of anyone doing a tape release for years and years, but over the past sort of 2 or 3 years, tapes there's been a massive resurgence in interest in people doing short run. So it is like going back to when I was a lot younger, like the bootleg tapes, like you say, just changing hands, and a very immediate word of mouth way of distribution, which is
yeah,
free of anything that requires electricity. They're physical. They exist outside of the sort of like electronic world, as it were, and
right.
it's great to see there is that interest, and vinyl as well.
Yeah,
There's massive
yeah,
research and sort of interest in vinyl in the past few years, and because when I was around, my early 20s, obviously vinyl was having its arguably its second heyday,
right,
with all
right.
sort of electronic music and the DJing and the raves and everything, and then it tailed right off. But now it's coming back into being something that's desirable and people want to collect again. And such a different way of delivering the music on that vinyl slab.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, one of my fondest, I've got a vinyl of David McCallum reading The Haunter of the Dark on vinyl from like 1967 or something.
Oh shit. Okay. Huh.
I mean, and I found that in a charity shop in Leeds. I think I paid about £1 for it.
Oh,
next
wow.
to nothing. But what are the chances of? I've never even seen another copy of the vinyl,
Right. Right.
let alone one that, if I'd lost that one, I could then afford to, replace it.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, digitals, they're there, aren't they? It's just easily available, and well, I say so much more considerations. And with Audient Void, I've actually bought some really nice CD cases.
Oh, nice.
But like the old document covers that used to have the two circular discs of paper with a little bit of cotton in between,
Huh.
so you can do a figure of 8 knot. So they're going to sit in there, and I've bought an old typewriter that's
Wow.
a little bit knackered, so it doesn't type quite straight, which I'm going to do all the text on.
Jeez, man, you sound like you're really getting into, like, you're really paying attention to all those fine little details then.
Yeah, trying to make them, worthy of the packaging and the music. Try and make it all of the same the highest standard I possibly can.
Right. Now
And
that's
then-
interesting.
Yeah, hopefully, like you say, people ascribe a bit more worth to that then.
Yeah, and that seems to be, I don't know if that could be related to like the resurgence of cassettes and such, but it like with me paying some closer attention to detail on like what you can do to make it a more valuable collectible piece for people, it is kind of interesting to explore what you can do to make it not just like, oh, I just put on a blank cassette and then you just like send it to people, like trying to invest more time into making it more of a creative outlet for yourself. And it sounds like you're doing that really well, like just finding
Yes.
ways to make it intriguing and different from everybody else's physical releases.
Yeah, and it's a nice process of imagination as well, isn't it? Like you say, there's a bit of thought processing behind it.
Right.
It'd be easy just to record something on a tape and just scroll on the label in a biro, and that, but to actually make it the most it can be, like with Alex from Death Tape, this latest collaboration. I think he said he's at the stage where the release has gone off for semi-complex packaging, was the phrase he used. But he hasn't alluded to anything other than that, and I'm just that even that ignites my imagination. Semi-complex packaging, so I can't actually wait to see what he's going to come back with.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I don't know what the hell that could mean.
No, but it's intriguing. I'm eager to find out now. So maybe he's using that to wet whistles as well. That it's coming in semi-complex packaging, but it's nice that people put this extra effort in. So it'd be easy just to run off a couple of covers and not really care. But like you were saying, having that little logo designed by the artist and a stamp, and it's those little extras. I think
like it at least shows in a sense to people like you're paying attention and you're like putting effort into it. It's not like
definitely, yeah. The more effort you can put into that release, the better, surely, because like you say, it's the people at the other end of the process are going to appreciate that extra effort.
Right.
And each one is then going to be, have its own little unique quirks. Like I was saying, this typewriter I've got doesn't type in a straight line, but not in a uniform way. It just, the ribbon slips at some point while you're using it. So there's that little sort of like random aspect in there as well, which makes every single, even though like you say in the tapes there's going to be 20 copies, but each of those copies is going to have its own little unique aspect that marks it as separate from the others.
Right.
And again, with digital downloads, you just don't get that, do you? It's just generic.
Time. And are you gonna what's the limited quantity you're gonna how much are you gonna limit the physical copies to?
Runs of 10, I think.
Oh shoot, okay.
So very very low numbers, but I initially got 50 of these CDs, so that's enough for sort of like 5 different runs, and the packaging all changed through time as well, and different projects, different packaging. I've got a couple of old maps of like ordnance survey maps of the country, like the Lake District, which I'm going to cut up and use as the inner sleeves for one release. So everyone's going to have a unique bit of the map tucked inside.
You're really thinking this shit through. It's gonna force me to step up my game while I produce more of these physical medias going forward.
This is one of the reasons that essentially it's sort of like running a year behind schedule. I was hoping, this time last year to have the first release out, but better take the time and get it right than, it ended up by bitten off more than I could chew, and the pressure of getting it all done.
Yeah, and there's never a need to like kill yourself over this kind of stuff, right? Like to make your life a living hellscape to try and get this stuff churned out. Like it'll come when it's convenient and comfortable for you.
Exactly. And should be enjoyable getting there, not like you say a pressurized situation.
Yeah, I think you burn yourself out before it's even out, and then when people start buying it, you don't even give a shit because like you just put so much mental strain on it, like that. Yeah. Like that's
you're
it's
so
hard.
Jaded by the process.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like it could be really easy, especially if you just get overly ambitious. You set lofty expectations and you can't follow through, but it sounds like you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, as I say, very nearly there. Got all the tracks ready to go on the SD card, so I just need to put a bit of text on there as well, and then as soon as we can get to the seaside, then bottle 1 will be launched.
Are you going to how are you are you just going to stand on the edge and throw it as hard as you can, or are you going to get like a little boat out there or something like that, or what are you?
Well, where we were thinking of launching is on the east coast of the UK. There's a place called Orford Ness, which it's a very small island. You have to get a ferry over to it, and you can only do that certain times of the year. And it's an ex-nuclear spy listening base. So there's all these derelict buildings that you can go and walk around as well. So I'm going to launch it there and investigate the tide times, get the tide tables, so I can launch the bottle as the tide's going out to get it as far as possible away.
Oh, interesting.
If you launch it when the tide's coming in, it's just going to end up on the beach you're standing on. So, I need to get the tide time so I can launch it just as the tide's turning. So, it's got a good 3 hours or so being taken out to sea.
Huh. Man, dude, you're really thinking this shit through. It's pretty impressive. I wish I could That'd be interesting to try. I don't think I could do a a cassette in a bottle. That'd be a little ridiculous.
It'd
But
be a big bottle, but yes,
right, that's interesting
something to
though.
think about. Because like you say, me with the North Sea and the Atlantic coast, Oregon, you've obviously got the Pacific coast, haven't you? So arguably the bottle could end up absolutely anywhere once it's swallowed up by the sea there. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah, and say the second one, I'm hoping to get into the Atlantic at some point. But yeah, there may be more. I may do maybe different releases. We'll see. But it's just going to be exciting to see what happens. And we may never hear from them again. But who knows? Stranger things have happened, haven't they?
Yeah, no, that sounds like a very interesting way to engage with your music beyond just like producing it and just putting it up on Bandcamp. At least that's like, I don't know. It sounds like a more like, it just sounds like a way more. It just sounds like a more passion. Like it just sounds like it like exudes passion for the project. Like you're like invested in it enough to like spend time on the weekends or whenever you have time off to like try and nestle it in certain places around the UK or firing off into the ocean. Like you're spending more time engaging with the sounds and appreciating them in a way, a lot of people don't really think through or they don't really consider. So
Yeah, I think so. And giving them a slightly different context as well.
right,
So as I say, the second project where I'll be hiding the CDs, places like down on the South Downs where they've got the sort of like the old stone and earth burial barrows, like 3,500 years old. So when we're passing one of those, just tuck a CD in a little nook or cranny somewhere in the back, and then hope another visitor is interested enough to take it home and listen to it, and then they go out somewhere they're visiting and hide it, and we'll see. Hopefully people are going to contact me and we can build this little sort of like map of where this CD's journey is going, and
yeah, that'd be
hopefully
awesome. Yeah.
sort of fire other people's imaginations to be part of the project as well. So
Yeah, like assign each one like a little serial number or something, like a 001, or like give them something so people can like say, oh, I got this one, and you can like track where that one is moved around.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Have them as specifically individual releases.
Yeah, no, that'd be super interesting. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. And
Yeah,
then, yeah, shit.
Finding the time to squeeze them all in, of course, is another challenge as well. But yeah, it's literally taking my music and taking the project out into the real world, and
Yeah.
these things interact, with nature and other people on a random basis that you don't really get with Bandcamp. Not that I know most of the people who download it, but like I say, I think they just download and then sit on a hard drive.
Right.
And that's the journey of the music and the release. It's a very sort of like intangible one. So actually a physical release, actually going out into people's hands to take part in the project and be part of the adventure, as it were.
Yeah, shit. I may end up doing that with some of the stuff I do. Maybe just finding a way to like tuck away one or two like cassettes out in the world somewhere around where I live or something like that. Just kind of tuck them away or stow them away somewhere for somebody else to find, and like
treasure hunt. And exactly, I think that aspect of not knowing what's going to happen, it is part of what enthuses me to do the project as well.
Right.
Because it's a bit of the unknown, isn't it? Like you're saying, people download off Bandcamp. I know what's happened there. They've clicked download. It's downloaded to their PC or Mac or tablet or whatever, and then it's just sitting on a hard drive. But a bit like, I suppose, like rearing an orphaned wild animal, and then you take it out into the wilds and you don't know where its life's going to take it.
Right. Exactly.
So sort of launch these CDs or the tapes off into the wild, and like you say, hopefully somebody who wants to be enthused by the project and take part in it will actually take the time to listen to it and then send it on its way.
Yeah, the stuff, unless you want to talk about some of that stuff with the potential collaboration project or that new project band thing you were going to do, where you're doing like a more industrial, like you're going to like lay industrial sound beds or bedrock for those guys that were in like the sludge band, which I thought was interesting. I mean, we could talk about that for a bit.
Project came about again initially as a result of somebody doing a remix for the Reclamation, and then he just contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a split and with his new band, which also did a track for the Reclamation project, and then again that was done within a week. It was so quick, and he even did the cover out of Pastels, the satellite, because it became a sort of accidental concept album, because his track and the band's track came back entitled The Descent and The Satellite Disintegrates. So I was like, so natural for me, I think, if I go third on the sort of like the track list.
And that was the Final Impact one, right?
Yeah, and then it just sort of made sense to sort of like tie off the story. And as we were going back and forth and we were working out a title for the split, and we said maybe Troika or Triad, both meaning a group of three, and then inadvertently discovered that the Triad was an actual class of satellite that used to be launched in the 70s.
Oh shoot, okay.
So it all meshed perfectly, and then he produced that brilliant cover as well, which is his own pastel works. And then because that had happened so well and so easily, and we got on quite well, said to want to do a collaboration between like the three separate entities, which something I'd not really thought about. First time I'll have worked with people who play actual physical instruments,
right, yeah,
rather than just use a digital medium. And it'll be nice for me to sort of explore a slightly more industrial sound.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I've been a lot of influenced by industrial bands growing up and through my musical career, but never really an area that I've produced any music in that I'd say was overly industrial. So it's going to be a nice learning curve and new experience for all of us, I think. And my part in the collaboration initially is going to be to do these sound beds as a nice foundation for them to build the drums and the guitars on top. Don't know if he's going to be purely instrumental or maybe some vocals will be put on some of the tracks. We'll see how it goes, and that's one of the great things about doing these collaborations, and that he's not having the a rigid set idea of where the project's going to end up, and seeing where we go as the creative process carries on. And as I said earlier, it's always something I love, these opportunities that are coming up, and loath to turn any of them down. I don't know how.
Right. Yeah. No. And I find that really awesome and commendable that you do that. Like, you kind of just jump into this and you're gonna see how this goes. And then I recall there's also that other bit in addition to that project. You said you were gonna so your Audient Void label, you were originally gonna call it Ague Records or something of that sort, or something to that effect, right? Ague, that has to do with malaria.
That's right, yeah.
And then you decided to make that an Arnott project, correct? Was it Arnott or was it Drone?
No, it's Arnott.
Arnott, yeah, and you were going to make it like an orchestral piece, right? And I thought that was interesting too.
That's right, yeah. It's going to do. My intent is to make it an orchestral piece, whereas I'll be using synthesized orchestral instruments, obviously, because I lamentably don't have access to a 64-piece orchestra.
Of course.
Would be a dream to be able to compose with an orchestra, but the intent is at the end of the project it is going to be something that could be taken out and actually played by an orchestra.
Right.
So I'm going to be stripping back a lot of the sort of like the effects and the manipulation of the sounds and actually trying to build an orchestral piece.
I see.
coupled with a nice 1930s public information film from Kentucky, where they were obviously having a big problem with malaria at the time. So it's got that lovely old brittle sound of old recordings and a very dated way of delivering the information. So I'm going to hopefully weave some of those samples in and out of this orchestral piece.
Yeah, that sounds like that'll be interesting, and that's what's cool. Like you don't shy away from, you're like, oh, I've never really done this, but you're just gonna jump in and just give it a shot and just kind of stumble around in the dark and be like, well, the only thing you can do is learn from it, even if it doesn't turn out to be like something you absolutely love. You at least made the effort to try something new and different, which is commendable for any artist, I would say, or most artists.
I think it essential as well for me, certainly, that evolutionary process.
Yeah, exactly.
To keep challenging, so it doesn't become formulaic. Because the moment for me producing music becomes formulaic, then that starts eroding away the creative process, because you're just following the same steps. Whereas, like you say, I don't know how this project's going to turn out, because it's not something I've even dabbled in before. But at the same time, like you say, the only way to find out is to get on and do it, and then hopefully the sum of the project will be something that I'm happy with, and it may open up another unexpected tangent for future projects. And
yeah, for sure.
As I say, I've long had a dream of being let loose with a proper physical orchestra and being able to compose something with 60 odd people all playing instruments.
Sure, yeah. No, and it sounds like this could be a way to start getting that ball rolling, or at least it'll give you like some context or some thoughts as to like how to structure stuff. Like, and you've probably listened to a bunch of it before. You probably know a lot of it, so you probably have like ideas and outlines of like how to create the framework for it. I'm sure it's just making it a reality, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's like you're saying, the structuring of orchestral music. I've spent a long time being fascinated, especially by Shostakovich's structural processes.
Right, yeah.
He was a bit different to the general Russian composers in that he learnt a lot of his trade at a music conservatory, but he played the organ at a local cinema for the silent film, so he was supplying the soundtracks, which is why in his orchestral pieces you suddenly get big stabs coming in and everything dropping away in a way that hadn't really been done before, because obviously he was watching the films going and fitting the music to what was going on the film, and then that influenced the way he composed for orchestras, which I think is what really got up Stalin's nose, is because it was so different.
Right.
In the end, he had a lot of pressure put on him to be more Russian in his composing, and he didn't want to be falling foul of the powers that be in Russia at the time. But seen as a sort of like decadent Western way of composing, because it didn't fit the the tropes and the norms of how they considered Russian music should be made. And so I studied that quite a lot at the music college, and obviously Penderecki, as I mentioned earlier. And again, the knock-on effect of this is that hopefully that's given me that bit of grounding, that bit of structure. I've got a A4 bit of paper with it all noted out, so I've sort of like done a chronology of the piece and where different sections of instruments are going to come in and out, where the leitmotifs are going to run through it, and then, as I say, and hopefully just be able to stitch in a few little samples here and there as well to give it the context. But I just thought that ague was too disease specific for a general label. Yeah, whereas all of the works are in some respect specific to a disease.
Right.
This upcoming one will be malaria, and then I'll move on to another. Depending on, I'm going to be reading about prion diseases next, so maybe we'll see a prion-based project in the future. But yeah, as I say, again, enthuses me this chance for me to be able to do something I've never done before.
Sure.
And just see how it transpires and works out. And like you say, the worst case scenario is I'm going to have learned a lot of stuff by going through the process.
Right. Yeah.
Which I'll then be able to use in future projects. So even if it's not a successful project, the learning curve is going to be reward enough anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that sounds like it'll be good. Do you have any timeline as to when you're hoping to get that churned out, or is it going to take? Are you not really concerning yourself with that right now?
Well, no. I've first on my list is finishing off the project for Joe, and I'll be moving on to the nought one, because I think that's going to take up quite a big chunk of this year. Is just this one piece, because I'm essentially learning from scratch with regards to a lot of the uses of the instruments and everything. So
sure.
I think it's going to be a longer term project. So I'll probably dip in and out of it, so I don't get cabin fever just working on that
sure.
one project for the next 6 months. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, probably a little bit of Fencepost work.
That sounds good, man. Just wanted to say thank you very much for your time. And
yeah, and I appreciate the chance to do so. The first time I've ever had a sort of like interview in person, as it were, talking to someone. And again, thank you for the chance to do it, and all of your continued support and interest in my various projects. And that it means a lot. Like I alluded to earlier, that we all support each other, and it's nice that I do get some support from you and other people like you as well. Right. And it keeps me keen to keep working.